Hey there, Leon. That is a deep reimagining of the material. And sometimes I'm never quite sure what to say in certain situations because sometimes such reshaping might be unintentional on the part of the arranger. Maybe just kind of getting away, letting their memory of how the piece should be get away with them. But I think in this case, you really had a plan of changing things around. So I'll discuss a little bit about how effective that is. Like for instance, as we just heard in the mock-up, the way that by kind of changing into like a kind of an obligato pedal with some of those harmonic pitches, like we sort of lose the sense of harmonic motion, and we end up having the modality of the melody sort of fighting with the root chord. But I mean, if that works for you, it's fine with me. All I really care about here is the orchestration and how well that works. So, in the context of those parameters. Excuse me, it's just really early in the morning here. So, I'm not going to make a big fuss about it. I actually think it's really, really cool and really, just a real different take. So, we're going to jump into this, and I really feel that the orchestration is quite original. I think there are some really great ideas. Let's talk about a few things, though, before we get started on this, and just start to take it apart according to the evaluation criteria. And that is to really evaluate the usefulness of celesta and harp in such strong scoring. So, right here, like, you're really not giving the celesta much of a chance to be heard. I would say, as like if this were written as a glockenspiel part, or maybe a keyboard glockenspiel part, better, like with some of these rips, would just be easier to play. Then I think there would be more of a chance for it to be heard over what's happening here. Very, very powerful strings and winds and horns, right? That just sucks up the sound of the celesta. I will make one caveat about the strength of the part in just a second, all right? Which I'm sure some other people have already fixated on. Now, right in here, you got a little bit of harp against all of this other stuff, right? And I would say that if you were to really suppress the volume of some of the parts in here, then the harp would come through really nicely, right? Fortissimo harp against pizzicato strings. Here the pizzicato is placed in a kind of a more or less in a lower register. It's crossing this part here in the left hand, but it not too bad. And then we've got some pizzicato in the other string. So I would say that if it's kind of strange, your dynamic mixing here, fortissimo, forte, mezzo forte, and so on. And I know it's not arbitrary. You're trying to balance things out. Whether that's according to the mock-up or your own instincts. Either way, I would say that if you really want this to come out, then the solo could be marked poco forte. The horns or trumpets, excuse me. It's really sort of messing me up that you didn't pull down the bar line to cover all the brass section. That's just, it is. And also this bracket here, right? The big main bracket should go all the way through. Like, it doesn't help to have the bracket just covering the two horns because you already have the sub bracket covering the two horns, right? So that's enough information. You don't need to overdo it, right? So the horns are not a separate. I mean, that may be your particular aesthetic in score reading, but it's not the it goes against about 100%, almost 100% of everybody else at the pro level. So yeah, just really next time make it one big bracket, one big bar line across all the brass. So anyways, to get back to this, mezzo forte trumpets are going to devour the sound of the harp here, right? No matter what the mock-up is saying. So it doesn't mean that this isn't feasible. You could sort of hedge your bets by giving it to the clarinets, and almost rhymes. And just have everybody play mezzo piano, and then this poco forte and this fortissimo, and then also back off the castanets too. And then you can have the timpani come back in at forte and so on. So that's one way of keeping the harp in the action. And then here, you're saying fortissimo celesta against the upper winds here. All right, so the problem with celesta is that this kind of balancing against the orchestra is really just wishful thinking. The celesta's fortissimo, right, its own dynamic range is quite different from that of the orchestra. And there are instruments that already have different balances, like what is fortissimo for a violin is very different from what is fortissimo for a trombone or even just a horn. So like right in here, like how loud is fortissimo for a celesta compared to the average dynamic of the rest of the orchestra? And it is kind of mezzo piano, right? Maybe mezzo forte against the strings. If it was just celesta and strings, the loudest you could get is mezzo forte. So you have to really think about that. And that would be mezzo forte against their mezzo forte, right? So they would have to play sort of piano, mezzo piano, or whatever in order for the celesta to really stand out. So, when we get into these very loud upper winds, especially piccolo, right? Or flute in its upper register, it's just harder to come through. So once again, glockenspiel or jeu de temp would be better. The keyboard glockenspiel would be better here than celesta. All right, so one last little thing that I'll touch on in terms of efficacy of special technique or scoring, and that is right here. You're using the harmonic of the fifth on the E string. So that is an open string, so you would think, well, it's probably going to be more powerful than the artificial harmonic on the A string playing a B with a touch 4 harmonic above it. Sorry, I'm kind of gluggy this morning. Actually, I recorded about half of this lecture, half of this evaluation yesterday, Leon, and then the power went out. We haven't had an outage in a year here, or maybe more, here in my little neighborhood. So I guess the time was coming, and it just sort of threw my whole rhythm off. So I'm coming back to it now, and I'm feeling pretty good about it this morning, except for the glugginess. So, yeah, so you would think that since it's an open string, it would be more powerful, but the problem is that the harmonic on the fifth is really kind of weak. It's more of a solo violin kind of a thing, or maybe like it's louder on cellos and so on. And of course, it's just a standard thing for double basses, but the projection is just not very loud. And like here you're saying fortissimo crescendo, right? And we've got these other instruments at fortissimo. It's just really not going to come through that really high B. It's at the same level of this piccolo B. So I would say you'll get a better effect playing like notating a B on the A string with a just standard touch 4 harmonic over it. And even at that, it won't be that loud. So, I mean, if you really want this to stand out, a fingered B is the loudest, right? Because the beautiful sheen that you're getting as well will be unremarkable in this texture, right? It's like it's not going to make the It's not going to make the texture glow, right? I mean, it's a beautiful idea to like like if you just take everything out and you leave these two elements, then it's a beautiful idea, right? But then when you start piling on everybody else, the E flat clarinet, the upper winds, all the other upper winds, it's just a lot for it sort of buries the specialness of this artificial harmonic, or this, it's a natural harmonic, but yeah, of this harmonic right in here. Now, one last little thing is that you don't really need to do this down up, right? I mean, leave it to the concert master. That's their job, right? They are going to decide how to have the bowing work for everybody. And this is actually obvious, right? This is the default. So marking the default is truly gilding the lily, right? You're giving them more advice than they need starting out the gate. Okay. All right. So I don't want to get too distracted in some of these notation things, but I just felt that those are things that you needed to know, because like the presentation of this is really, it's very professional. So you owe it to yourself to avoid that possible kind of mistake or over helpfulness or out of balance parts. Okay, so now let's talk about pardon me again. Let's talk about some of our criteria. Pitch weight in the upper middle register of the piano. You're adding lower pitches here and there, right? And expanding on the picture, but for the most part, you really are following the dictates of that particular register, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. But I do think that the touches here and there, just a little touch of lower register, really, really helps. So, I said you've done the minimum to avoid that problem, or or to address that concern, right? It's a different thing from avoiding a problem, addressing the concern. And that doesn't mean that, you could have done more. Sure, of course you could have done more, but it's no judgment call on you, right? It's perfectly fine. So now, the next criterion is thematic material repeating often, possibly sounding repetitive if orchestrated the same way throughout. So, with these two sections, I mean, they're pretty much the same. You've got some A2 bassoons kind of high here, and you've got no doubling for this higher pitch. And I would say that would be something, if you're going to have bassoons in a rather exposed place in their tenor register A2, then a little bit of thickening from the strings is extremely helpful. Like, for instance, you could throw in an E right in here, right, to sort of double this. It's kind of interesting. It's the way that this is scored, kind of all in tenor clef, and you barely need the tenor clef at all. I mean, you could sort of justify it in here, but this is the kind of thing where you could leave the tenor clef out, right? I just feel it would be way more in character for this to be in bass clef all the way through, even with a few higher notes like this A up here from time to time. I would say keep out of tenor clef unless the passage really has a tenor register kind of character to it, right? So even right here, it is still more of a bass register sort of thing, just because of the overall curve, right? So, yeah. So as far as the orchestration of these two, so sort of replicated passage, it's really, really cool. I really love the kind of this kind of circular little riff right in here. I think that's very effective. And then the way that the parts are working in contrary motion here. And I love the use of the E-flat clarinet, more or less playing in octaves with the piccolo. And, then you've got your clarinets below and so on, the oboes in the middle, and some of these same elements being replicated here or doubled in the strings. So, I mean, it more or less works. Just to be absolutely perfect and perfectly fussy about it, you could probably drop your horns down to Forte if you wanted to. If you just wanted to get the absolute perfect balance across all the parts. And it would also help if you're just really stuck on having celesta in there and this style of harmonics. If I can't shake you from that, then maybe I could convince you to bring down your horns by 1 degree. Now, here it's kind of interesting. You're saying 1, 3, and 2 and 4, right? So this is really more of a first and second horn kind of thing, right? And you should really read up on some of my writings about horn, about the roles of horns. In fact, the one that I just did, I just released exclusively on Patreon, Hobbits in the Horn section. I feel that one, like in particular, like like the first and second do things together in big heroic ways more often than you think. Like especially just a row of intervals, right? That is better for them to be playing because it's they are really aware of each other's intonation, right? They are nailing it all the time, getting it absolutely perfect. I would say that if you had this written D sharp doubled, that would be a third horn part, right? So this is better off as first and second, and you yourself as an arranger, as an orchestrator, are better off scoring 1, 2, 3, 4, so that you avoid possible bad habits. So now to look at the other section, melodic development soaring quite high. Oh wait, it's just one last little thing. That is sort of leading back into it into this section right here, with double bass and timpani. All you need to do is just do that bum bum again right here, and then that is enough of a difference between these two parts to make them feel not so much exactly identical, right? Because when you think about it, you really are kind of replicating the same thing 4 times identically, more or less, right? With a one tiny little change, 2 if you count the 5-1 right in here. So I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying this is something for you to think about, something for you to consider. Do you really want to do the same exact thing 4 times? As beautifully done, as beautifully conceived as it is, do you really want that? Do you really want that to really just be so replicated? Now, right in here, we go to two more criteria: melodic development soaring quite high, accompaniment figures covering a wide range. So we already talked a little bit about the accompaniment figures right in here. I would say that, despite the fact that I'm telling you, hey, make sure that the pizzicato isn't too loud and so on, if you really want your harp to come through there, then even if you do drop this down to say mezzo piano or something like that, just really back it off, then I would still want this to be doubled by another instrument just for a little bit more solidity in the way everything else is playing. So maybe you could have, say, like clarinet, one of your standard clarinets, or trade off between the clarinets if you want to. But this is really cool right in here, the way that you've got your flute and harp working together, and then the piccolo coming in, doubling at the octave with the violins. I think that's actually a pretty nice trade-off. All right, I think that works really nicely, and of course having the oboe double. Now it's a little conservative. Like you could easily have your oboe player doubling the piccolo from below and jumping up to that D if you wanted to. So there's really no need to not have a D here unless you have some other concern. And as far as these guys are concerned, like once again, just backing them off to mezzo piano or having some other wind instrument play this line will help to balance things out so that the harp is audible. So, so here, those same two criteria. Here you're just going with strings. You get and this is nice how you have the piccolo take over right in here, and the strings come up from below. It's really spare. It's really kind of minimalistic, but I still like it a lot. And I almost think that like you could make this a smoother transition by having the piccolo start a few notes before at maybe pianissimo and then crescendo forward to fortissimo, basically just taking over that line as it goes up, rather than just starting on this note, which, you're already at fortissimo, right? You better tell this piccolo player what you want here. But even if it weren't for that, you would still just, say you started mezzo forte or forte, you would still really feel the piccolo players just starting right on the downbeat. Whereas if you start a few notes before, maybe start doubling this pitch, which of course will be written B in the staff, start at pianissimo and then crescendo forwards to fortissimo, then I think that you get a really smooth, elegant line going all the way up to that high E. So there's something a little underpowered about the way that this is scored, right? You can hear it on the mock-up, and that is, unfortunately, is going to be similar to what is going to happen, right? And it's a little strange to. I kind of don't want to maximize the screen because then I end up with a different screen size when I go back down with the way that this is all set up. Yeah, so you are asking for an open E and a harmonic, like an open, a harmonic on the open string in the touch 4 position. Right, so yeah, I mean, I just don't know how well that works, right? Because what we really need here is this pitch of E to be really strong throughout here, and we're kind of not getting it. Instead, we're kind of getting this. We're getting the A above, right, and the E below. So we're not getting that dun 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 dun. So instead of this is bum bum bum, and it's not that strong, right? Especially considering all of the scoring that came before winds plus strings, and then just the pungency of the piccolo rushing up here, right? So just suddenly it will lack that color, and then the color will come back, right, in a big way here. Yeah, just by the way, I neglected to mention the accompaniment figures, and they're all fine in here. This is really nice. See, this is what I would want over here a little bit more. The the strings and the winds working together to realize those accompaniment figures, but not too powerfully if you really intend to maintain the harp right in there. And this is all fine. It's just a question of. Oh, and by the way, it break the beam. It's just so much more readable, right? Just break the beam. This, I just feel that this is a little over fussy. It's the kind of thing that leads to mistakes more than solves them, right? Yeah. So yeah, just break the beam in this kind of scoring. So, but the only thing that I would suggest here is if there's any way of like having a conversation, it might be fun to put in here, right? It doesn't have to be the same exact strategy each time, right? Or of course, it's not exactly the same strategy because you're adding E flat, clarinet in there, and so on. But it really just all feels much the same kind of thing. But I really do like the changes that you're making to like the accompaniment figures and so on, or the accompaniment strategy. Like repeating those sixths instead of just holding them. Yeah. All right, and that leads to our driving staccato, transitioning smoothly into the next passage, adding clarinets, and I mean that's all really cool, but you just have to be aware that like the push here and this strength and so on, it doesn't really have that bum 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 that's in the piano part leading to this, right? So it's just basically you're just running down. I mean, it still works. Like so we're getting into some pretty serious reimagining of the work, right? And I really like it, by the way. I love these triplets and these horn tuplets. I think they work really nicely together. So fortissimo, piano, crescendo, back to fortissimo. Yeah, okay. That's fine. Yeah, and then, trombone and English horn working together on the melody. I really like this motion in here in the bass. That's really fun. And you really added a lot of things, this bum bum bum, and then the answer, the response from oboe and trumpet in octaves. Yeah, da 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 dun. And then the big punch, right, on the downbeat. Um, and I see what you're doing here as well. Like you're kind of trying to keep the weight off of the trombones. Yeah, yeah, that's all right. That's all good. You know what I would do though is I would throw in cellos and violas as early as possible in terms of the doubling, right? So, um, yeah, so the violas could come in on the E, the cellos could be playing A down there, A E A, da 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 da. I mean, there's no need to hold them back, right? I like right in here, like you just have two notes of bassoon as if that were substituting for the cellos, right? It'd be better just to bring the cellos in, and you can leave this in here if you want to, right? And I just I love the power of the trombones on that line. It's so cool. Okay, however, right, here, what's the dynamic marking? It seemed to have gotten hidden by the boxed text. This should be fortissimo, right? So this is the kind of harp scoring that will come through to a degree, right? It'll come through here. It'll come through here. Now you probably notice in the mock-up it disappears right on this. Like when the horns and the bassoon family bark. They go warf. It just really kind of kills the harp right in here, right? So that's a reality you are going to have to expect, right? Is it even worth it to have the harp do anything there if their big rolled chord is going to disappear? The bigger you make the rolled chord, like if you can make it like a hand over hand kind of thing, left, right, left, going over the top to get even more notes, then the better chance the harp has got of being heard in this stronger texture. I mean, it is stronger, but this is a place in which the harp can excel, where it's much harder here, even though you have, you really are doing your best to balance things out. It's still not the strongest, but I'll talk about that when we get there. So our major concern here, or concerns, right at the beginning are contrast of color, breadth of texture. So you throw that in beautifully, right? Maintaining differentiated roles in closely spaced melodies and overlapping accompaniment figures. I'll give it to you that the first 8 bars of B, you really do that well, right? And then going on from where we were before, the combination of the bass clarinet and trombone, first trombone, I thought worked out really, really well. And once again, this is minimal on celesta, but would sound great on glockenspiel or keyboard glockenspiel. And then like the, using pizzicato as an alternate color to the arco right in here when doubling the lower winds and brass. I think that's really, really nicely done. So all really, really great, and of course this very, very Spanish flavored kind of accompaniment right in here. Yeah, da 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 da. Yeah, just it's really, really cool. All right, so now we get to the next concern. Keeping the triplets from overwhelming the melodic line, widely spaced left-hand patterns, and just really the coherence of the melody right in here. So I just really feel like there's something missing here in this section. It just feels really weak. Do you know what I mean? It feels like you're doing a lot of what you can possibly do to highlight. You're really trying to keep the flutes from running out of breath at that low pitch. You are really suppressing everybody else's dynamic here. So the harp and the lower flutes can be nice and strong, and it's all really admirable. But I just barely can hear anything. You know what I mean? It's just like it just seems like everything is very, very unclear. So that would be. That I would say this is the section that probably needs the most work. I mean, there's some great ideas though, right? This is kind of strange. Meno forte, right? You would think that this would be stronger, and it would be too strong for the flutes, but really, the end result is that I just really can't hear anything. I can't hear this clarinet, and I can't hear the bass clarinet. But there's a bigger concern, and that is the really beautiful left-hand pattern in the piano score. Right? I just really am not hearing that come through. I'm hearing dun 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 dun. Right? But that doesn't have the sense of leaping that is in the original piano score. So, so that I feel that sort of robs the passage of its energy. It does really sound rather sinister and spooky and everything else. This is really going to stab out, even at piano, more than you might expect, right? And then, just really, once again, just you're reimagining the left-hand part, and maybe the reimagining here goes a little far. All right. So, some ways around it, right, would be to basically, like, first thing I would say is make your flute part forte, right? Like, you are forte against everybody else's soft stuff, right? So that's the first thing. Forte in the flute, right? And you don't need to write out Mano F or anything. You could just have your what I would also do is I would change this dynamic curve to go bum 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 bum. Have it like crescendo, diminuendo, right? So that you just maintain the level throughout, right? So just make this forte, right, so that we can hear it, and make this forte so we can hear it. Same comments about the dynamic curve here. Just you know, crescendo, diminuendo, and you're back to forte, right? And you don't have to write LV here, right? That's just completely unnecessary. The harpist, you know, is not going to stop this from vibrating. They are going to know that at the tempo that you have got marked for this, by the time they come around to here, the string will not be vibrating so much that there will be stomping, right? So it'll be just perfect. So they're not going to do anything to put their palm on the string to stop it from resonating. You do not need to worry about that. Now here, I'm wondering why you were just, that you have these rests after these rolls, right? Why can't this be like a big old, a nice big huge half note, and then maybe just cut this one out and have a big half note there, and a dotted half note here. All right. So, yeah. Yeah, so make your melodic line loud, right? Make it forte, make it strong. And then there just needs to be something happening here with the triplets. I don't know what it is in your mock-up. It's just making it, it should be louder, like meno F, right? Whatever that means. Meno F, just less loud as before, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean mezzo forte, right? It just means not as loud. But you're using it as a mezzo forte. But mezzo forte against piano, right? That doesn't really balance. But if this is brought up to forte, and then this is, say, mezzo piano, right? Then I think you have a really good balance of the elements, right? And then più piano. I mean, I think you mean mezzo piano here, right? But I mean, still really cool scoring. And here we get to like the most convincing reimagination of all, and you're having these this sort of pedal ostinato. You're just really just kind of driving home the tonality right here, these A fifths, and that's not really what the harmony does, right? And then when you transition, right, for the new theme, the new position of the theme, and so on, you change to another tonality and stick with it, right? So it is really cinematic, and it kind of made me wonder, like, why there wasn't like a tubular bell in there strike, just really, just brings back, it just really, I mean, it almost feels like, not in a cheesy way at all, but just really feels like a Western, you know what I mean? Okay, so just a few notes about some notation things and so on. So right in here, there's I'm still just seeing absolutely no reason why you couldn't have scored this 1, 2, 3, 4, right, with the F and G sharp in the upper staff, and the D and the E, written D and E in the lower staff. This just and then here you have the first and the second working together in octaves, right, at first, and then intervals and so on. It's more convenient to read this on the upper staff. Okay, and then the other thing is just like, how much realistic chance does the harp have in here? And actually, and the celesta actually has a fairly good chance. But I would just say bigger rolls, bigger chords. Now here, that's just is not coming through. That's, not unless you are miking the harp and this is a recording session for a film score, which it really has cinematic flavor. Don't take that as an insult, it's a compliment. Okay, and then the celesta up here. Once again, keyboard glockenspiel. It'll just come through really beautifully above. All right. So the big problem here, or the big concern at C, is convincing allargando expansion. Something you might have noticed in the piano score is that I left in the pedal marking. In fact, in the template, I just really wanted to make sure that people understood that there was pedal there in pretty much every pianist's interpretation. They're putting their foot on the gas, and as they play through the notes that reach upwards, the notes sustain, right? That was the message there. So here, I feel it's less convincing, right? The harp will sustain, but then you're actually telling the harpist to damp the pitches as they go up, right? By throwing in these rests, you're basically telling the harpist to damp the pitches. Now here, if you went eighth note, quarter, eighth, quarter, and this was a dotted quarter note and then an eighth, then that would be telling the harpist, hey, just let all the pitches sustain as you go up. And that would go towards it somewhat, but it just really does not feel like a convincing allargando expansion. So if you were to come back to this, I would say just really attempt to just really have the notes hold on as you reach upward, and to really have it push and then lift into this section, right? Because you can still do that if you are headed for a softer dynamic, and I think that's admirable. The softness in here, allowing the harp and the celesta to come through, but in this case, I think you should mark the celesta forte and the harp fortissimo. All right, and then just back everybody else off to pianissimo, right? And you can have the fluctuations. These okay. Now, really unnecessary to throw in niente here. So please take my advice. Niente is something you should introduce into your score when it is something that will be noticed for its own sake, right? Not just as a throwaway, because what you're going to get here is piano to triple P, right? It's the same exact thing. That is exactly where the that's what you will get. So you might as well write it without all this fancy schmancy stuff right in here of niente. And as far as this is concerned, throwing it in once, that's all right. But you could still just have you could just leave out the little circle and just have the crescendo from crescendo into pianissimo, and they will basically play the same thing. So it's unnecessary, especially for concert music. Now, you're seeing the niente all the time, and if since you are a Patreon supporter, Leon, you can just go back and you can watch my lecture on the facehuggers, the facehuggers cue from Aliens, where James Horner and his orchestrator have marked niente, and you can just judge for yourself whether or not that works. He's got winds and brass, and they are going down to niente, and you know what happens there? You just end up with a nice, beautifully shaped note, because there's just no possible way for all of those instruments to go down in such a quick amount of time to a very, very stylized, very just to an invisibility that just is not possible, right? So doing it for its own sake in very exquisite textural music is one thing, and then you will have my support all the way, provided that the instrument can actually play niente. Say maybe it's a member of the string section, or it's maybe brass with mutes, or it's flute in its lower register, clarinet. That in that case, you've got me. I've got your back all the way. But just kind of throwing it in here and there, that it's a less effective way of expressing what you want here. All right, I'll get off my niente soapbox. But I think that it's very cool to have your oboe in here, and I think that the big dynamic contrast here between loud oboe and everybody else being soft, I think that works really beautifully, right? So I would say everybody else pianissimo, except loud, forte on the oboe. And you know what? Like you have like no second oboe playing for this entire passage until you get to here. So there's no need to have this in first voice and second voice as a bar rest. Just have it all in first voice with with your one period here, right? Which is almost like to score like this and to put one period right here to tell us that this is the first voice. That is like superfluous, right? It's one or the other, right? Either throw in the two voices with one of them in a bar rest and don't say anything, or just say one period with no bar rest in the second voice, right? Pick one. And then here, it's really obvious when you bring in the second voice. You don't even need to mark two here, right? We'll just know that that's what's going on. You're bringing in the second voice here with a... And then here, I would say, yes, leave in this bar rest here. Okay. So, and then moving to here just really kind of is getting into, a very, kind of very modern, like modern Western kind of sound. I really, really love the scoring in here. I feel it's extremely powerful. This is the most powerful part of all the orchestration, and it works really beautifully. So I'm not going to make a big judgment call about the about how you're changing the harmony here, and some of the context of the music. It's just because the results are just so powerful. Okay, and careful treatment of the melodic voice to make it feel authentic to the composer's style. You are going so far away from the composer's style that that's not a concern. Keeping the accompaniment pattern from becoming too regular and therefore too predictable. It is very regular, but it's regular in a very gripping way. And then here you're changing the accompaniment pattern anyways to this, to this kind of counter melody. And so far, as the melodic treatment here, the first, once again, you don't need the if you're writing one here, you don't need the second voice in a bar rest. So you've got the octaves here, and then the oboe commentary, and then the clarinet coming from below, and like right in here, like the departure from, I would say within these three bars, the departure from the chord progression is really the most obvious. But if you want that tension, then that's fine. And fairly nice balance here in the dynamics. I think it's working pretty good. I don't think you need to bring the bassoons up to, well, I don't know, fortissimo. I would say forte. Forte with the accents is good enough. It's strong enough. And then this big, beautiful octave scoring in here. Oboes, A2 plus clarinet, and then piccolo and first flute above. That all works great. And that just takes us here. Yeah, and just just like the obstinacy, right? Ostinato comes from obstinacy, being stubborn. It just really becomes very, very cinematic right in here. Okay, so here, this is how to kill your harp part, right? If you put a bracket, meaning no arpeggiando, against a forte or fortissimo chord in the other instruments, especially with trumpets involved, you're not going to hear the harp, right? The more the harp rolls, the more audible it is. The less that it rolls, the less audible it is against a strong texture in the other instruments, right? So there can be no way of erasing your harp part in a strong texture better than doing this, right? So don't mark a bracket if you intend for this to come through. Now, it would not possibly come through that well anyways. Like, you would kind of need the the pitches to be marked an octave higher, maybe with a big roll on it, right? If you really wanted the harp to come through. But I think that, maybe what you're looking for here is pizzicato, right? Is a sort of a plucked sound. So I don't think that there's any way out for you. I think that you would be better off possibly, I don't know, trying to get one of your lower one of your lower string players to go to pizzicato for a second, or to maybe have the bassoon family play this as a sort of a punchy, like accented staccato. But yeah, the harp isn't going to come through for you here. Yeah, and then this is really, really neat, the way that you handled this. Really, really nicely done. All right, using that chisora there. Yeah, I really, really love the way that this ends. And then this really seems to be leading to the agitato. It just really, it really could be gripping, continuing on from there. So what a strong score, Leon. Just, and really doing things that are unexpected and reshaping things to suit yourself. I don't know, or just some other vision. Then so just obviously you've got a knack for reinterpretation, and we're seeing it at its strongest here as we get towards the end. And that is just really impressive. And also just the general color of things is just really beautifully done. I really I appreciate, I'm telling you, like, this doesn't work, that doesn't work, but it's just because I'm trying to sort of reach into what is right about the colors that you're headed for, and just to turn up the knob on that, right? Yeah, so I just found it really enchanting and evocative and cinematic in a good way. And I really hope that you are getting pro work, or will be getting pro work soon, because it's just really, it just is such a strong score. And it just, yeah, it really does a lot of credit to this this orchestration challenge in general, to get things of this quality. So thank you so much. Really, really, really enjoyed it. So in addition to thanking you for that, thanks so much for supporting the channel, and for just being a part of this big conversation that we're all having over our scores. Something that just keeps bringing energy back to me. When I think, oh geez, I think I'll take a few days off, and I come back to it. I think, well, I'll just do a score in the morning, and then I've done a stack of them by the time I get to the end of the day. And it really keeps me going, and it's so exciting to see people interpreting and reinterpreting the music in so many different ways, so many strong ways. So thanks for that. Thanks for everybody out there who's watching and leaving comments and likes and views and so on, and people on social media who are sharing this, and like retweeting my posts, and talking about it, and bringing more people into the community. It's all really hugely appreciated, and I'm so excited to see people improving, and to see their take on everybody's take on the same material, so different. It's so encouraging. So with that, I will let you guys go and see if I have time to do another evaluation before breakfast, maybe even two.